Welcome, everyone, to the Tuesday, October 3rd, 2023 Tumwater City Council. And I welcome everyone here. We do have quite a few people in the audience this evening. So we will start off with roll call.
Councilmember Leetta Dahlhoff.
Present.
Councilmember Angela Jefferson.
Present.
Councilmember Joan Cathy.
Present.
Councilmember Eileen Swarthout.
Present.
Councilmember Michael Althauser.
Present.
Councilmember Peter Agabe.
Present.
Councilmember Charlie Schneider.
Present.
Mayor Debbie Sullivan.
And I'm present. Join me for our salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. First, I want to make a reminder to council members that we have a revised agenda this evening. So I just want to make sure that you are working from the correct agenda. With that, we will move to special items, and we have a proclamation for Fire Prevention Week, and Councilmember Swarthout will read that proclamation.
Thank you, Mayor. Whereas the City of Tumwater is committed to ensuring the safety and security of all those living in and visiting our city. Fire is a serious public safety concern, both locally and nationally. Homes are the locations where people are at greatest risk. And whereas home fires killed more than 2,800 people in the United States in 2021, according to the National Fire Protection Association, and fire departments in the United States responded to 338,000 home fires. And whereas cooking is the leading cause of home fires in the United States, and fire departments responded to more than 166,400 annually between 2016 and 2020. 2 of every 5 home fires start in the kitchen, with 31% of those fires resulting from unattended cooking. And whereas more than half of the reported non-fatal home cooking fire injuries occurred when victims tried to fight the fire themselves, children under 5 face a higher risk of non-fire burns associated with cooking than being burned in a cooking fire. And whereas residents should turn pot handles toward the back of the stove, always keep a lid nearby when cooking, keep a 3-foot kid-free zone around the stove, oven, and other things that could get hot. Watch what they heat and set a timer to remind them that they are cooking. Whereas first responders are dedicated to reducing the occurrence of home fires and home fire injuries through prevention and protection education. And whereas 2023 Fire Prevention Week theme, cooking safety starts with you. Pay attention to fire prevention. Effectively serves to remind us to stay alert and use caution when cooking to reduce the risk of kitchen fires. And therefore, Debbie Sullivan, Mayor of the City of Tumwater, does hereby proclaim October 8th through October 14th, 2023 Fire Protection Week, and urges all residents and businesses in the City of Tumwater to heed those messages and to support the efforts of the Tumwater Fire Department and other emergency service to keep us safe from fires and in times of medical emergencies.
Great, thank you. I think the Assistant Chief is here to say a few things, and then I will come down with a proclamation.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. Sean Crimmins, Assistant Chief for Tumwater Fire. It's my pleasure to kind of talk about a couple things really related to cooking safety, as that is our kind of the message that NFPA and fire service is pushing out this year. So a couple helpful hints for the public. While cooking, stay in the kitchen while you are frying, boiling, grilling, or broiling food. Leave the kitchen for even a short period of time. Remember to turn off the stove. Keep anything that can catch fire, oven mitts, wooden utensils, food packaging, away from the stovetops. Or any oven fires, turn off the heat, keep the door closed. Funny little side note with that one, my teenage daughter, who's now 26, decided to put a pizza in with the cardboard. Turns out those do catch on fire. So leaving it closed does help. So And then when all else fails, obviously call 911 in any of those situations, and our firefighters will come assess if there's any other dangers. So along with that, during the not just week, but the month of October, all of our firefighters, paramedics go out to several daycares, all the schools, and teach fire safety, do public education talks throughout the entire month. So it's a busy month for our crews, but it means a lot. You know, really remember to change out your smoke detectors too, because we've seen, especially in this county recently, that can make a huge difference. So with that, if anybody has any questions, be happy to answer.
Great. Any question, Councilmember Agabi?
Chief,
Yeah.
I thought I was being crazy at my house when I said to them, don't leave the port handle sticking out, turn it backwards, and they would look at me as if I'm crazy.
Right.
So now I find that I'm actually doing something crazy, not just being okay. So my question is, do you guys go to school to tell them? Because my kids, the pizza, sticking the pizza in the oven with the pizza box happens all the time, and I say you can't stick that in the oven.
Yeah.
So
Well, yeah, you heard what happened to me. Yeah. It's yes, when we so we do visit, especially the elementary schools and the daycares. We tend to go to the high schools more for do fire extinguisher classes, and really kind of start hitting CPR stuff. But we kind of teach at that younger age, the fire safety talks, our crews put on the bunker gear, kind of show them that type of stuff.
they really need to know you can't put a cardboard in the oven.
No,
That doesn't work.
Yeah, that same daughter also put a pizza in the microwave for 10 minutes. So you can't do that either. Yeah. She is successful now though. She's doing well. Yeah. 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 Anything else?
Here's a proclamation, Assistant Chief Crimmins, and I really appreciate it. And I do have pencils, but I figure I'll give them all out at the next one instead of trying to figure out who gets one where. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, the next one is Chief Hurley will be introducing our new firefighter, Barrett Brown.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Yeah, we had one of our new paramedics here at the last meeting, I think, and we're excited to be able to start bringing folks back to introduce our new employees to you, so you know who's working on behalf of the city. So tonight, want to introduce Barrett Brown. Barrett was started with us on September 1st. A little bit about his background. He grew up in the Orange County, California area. He worked for a private ambulance company down there before serving in the United States Army for 5.5 years as an Army medic. He left the military, began his firefighter training, and fortunately we were able to pick him up, and we're happy to have him. So I'll let him say a few words.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I just wanted to take this opportunity to let you guys know how grateful I am to be spending my career here, and I'm excited to be working with all you guys over the coming years.
Thank you.
I have a question, Mayor.
So now we'll do the pencils. So welcome to the city. I really appreciate it. And you bring a lot of experience, so.
We also have Battalion Chief Donovan Kapp here, Barrett's battalion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are you going to stay for the entire meeting?
That was a no.
Did you get a call? Did you get a call? Yeah.
Okay, next item is public comment. And if somebody can bring me the chart, do we have anyone registered online?
We do. We have one.
Okay. And
That's Pamela Hansen.
can you allow her to come in? And when she's ready, I will have her. Pamela, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, go ahead. And you have 3 minutes for public comment. Please state your name and address for the record.
Pamela J. Hanson, PO Box 14521, Tumwater, Washington 98511. Greetings, Tumwater Mayor and City Council. Thank you for this opportunity to testify. Obviously, there's more than one important topic on the agenda this and every City Council meeting, and there is only 3 minutes for the record. Tonight, I would like to revisit the issue from November 1, 2021, when the previous City Council and Mayor, most of you in that respect, voted to approve a 12-year multifamily tax exemption for 2 parcels of apartments located in between Toyota and Home Depot and across from Tumwater Middle School. That evening, those 2 property tax exemptions were unanimously approved without knowing the final valuations and tax burden shift of those properties. In other words, a tax exemption of an unknown dollar amount was approved that evening on November 1, 2021. In addition, my public testimony was contradicted later during that meeting regarding the tax shift fact, and I was not allowed the opportunity to defend myself. Currently, the subject properties look complete, and new construction property is only assigned a value and added to the tax rolls for tax purposes after completion. Therefore, the 12-year tax exemption can now be calculated with a more accurate tax exemption estimation. In my opinion, that should have happened back in 2021, even if it was a bank loan value estimation entered into the public record or an informed vote of the council. The taxpayers need to know how much of a tax exemption Glen Wells was granted. I hope that information can be provided and placed in the public record at a council meeting soon. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we have no one else online.
No.
Okay. In council chambers, I have Dave Nicandri, 3 minutes. And do we have the intern? After you state your name and address, thank you.
Dave Nicandri, 505 4th Avenue Southwest, 98512. It was just pure kismet when I was here 2 weeks ago for my bi-weekly lecture on the climate mitigation plan, that should be the night that the update for the interlocal agreement on the mitigation plan was collaboration plan was before the council for consideration. I noted with interest that night in paragraph 3, subparagraph 4, that there's the creation of a community advisory group where they are looking for a variety of perspectives on climate mitigation actions. I would respectfully volunteer to serve on that committee if there's any openings for the city of Tumwater, and I promise, with a longstanding commitment to the city going back to the 1970s, as a member of the council, that if appointed, I would serve and offer constructive thought with the usual dose of good humor. In furtherance of my longstanding comments, I'd like to revisit a favorite theme of mine, which is on page 26 of the 2020 Climate Action Plan, where it states that the entire edifice of the plan is premised, and I quote now, on the basis that residents will have the resources to afford the transition. I note with interest that last month, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Rishi Sunak, issued a 5-year delay from 2030 to 2035, banning the sale of new gas and diesel cars, and again, my favorite, delaying the ban on new natural gas furnaces. His stated reason for doing so, direct quote, is the unacceptable costs on ordinary people that these measures would exact. It's good to see that there are some glimmers of reality being applied to this debate. In the United Kingdom, and I'll just stay with apples to apples here, carbon emissions per capita in the United Kingdom are equal to the mid-19th century. If Britain tomorrow eliminated all carbon emissions and returned to the agrarian subsistence pattern of the Middle Ages, given the massive and rapidly rising levels of emissions of carbon from China and India, it wouldn't make a bit of difference in the global warming situation. So I will just stop there. I got 20 seconds left. Let me just say, it's good to see so many of you here in person. As someone who comes to the council meetings, again, on a bi-weekly basis, it's good to see my presence reciprocated by your own. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Next person on the list is Sharon Kuntz. If you could come and 3 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Sharon Kuntz. Oops, that's very loud. Is that okay?
Yes. you're
Okay.
fine.
Sharon Kuntz, I live at 12417 Tilly Road South. And I'm here to discuss just real quickly the common interest and confidentiality agreement we've been reading about. This document is not a normal one about attorney-client privilege. The port and city have been working on this HCP for at least 2 years, and there's been no need for this agreement until now. First of all, I'd love to know what triggered it, and especially the part that makes documents retroactively secret. If you pass this agreement, I'm not even sure that you're allowed to know, but I'm very sure that I'm not. They make it very clear that a whole bunch of this stuff stays confidential, and how much of it should stay confidential. Both the port and Tumwater are public entities. Now, you know, and I know there are good reasons to keep things secret in real estate deals, for instance. You don't want speculators driving up the price of, maybe you want to buy something as mitigation land, for example. But real estate deals already carry with them the ability for public entities to keep information quiet. But now, if you find a new piece of information you think the public should know about, and the Port of Olympia says, no, we don't want them to know, they win that argument automatically, according to what I read in this agreement. And I read the whole agreement with some horror, I might add. And if a member of the public files a public records request and Tumwater thinks the public should see what they requested, and the port says no and refuses that request, the port wins that argument too. If one party says no to requests like that, you have to support that decision. And I would assume and fervently hope that you would not want to be put in that position. What if a council member learns something about the Swire lease, for example, on the airport, that maybe they are not planning a bottling plant on it, despite all that discussion about it, that property they leased for 75 years? Check out that lease. It doesn't have any decision about a bottling plant, no guarantees it ever whatsoever. What if you instead learn that they've decided to do something that most of us around the area would find much more disgusting and discouraging and wouldn't want anything to do with? Shouldn't that council member immediately make that public so that citizens know and can react? But that would be forbidden by this agreement. And frankly, I think that would be outrageous. Your role of protecting your constituents and informing them would be shattered. This document infringes on the public's right to know, and I suspect even the Freedom of Information Act. It certainly goes further than similarly titled agreements that I've seen cited, and I spent a long time on the American Bar Association site studying this today. A chilling effect would be imposed on free speech of people working on this project. From my reading, it sounds as if a staff member who finds some alarming information could be threatened with legal action if they tried to repeat it to you or others. And then, and this is big, if they leave the working group, they must destroy anything on their computer that pertains to this project, thus potentially destroying evidence in any request for public records or from a lawsuit. So friends, this is not how public entities are supposed to work. Their work, which is of course your work, needs to be done in daylight, not in darkness. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I do not have anyone else signed up. Is there anyone else in council chambers who wish to speak this evening? Okay, with that, we will go to the consent calendar. Do I hear a motion to approve the consent calendar?
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Council Member Swarthout, second by Council Member Dahlhoff to approve the consent calendar. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. All right, with that, we have approved the minutes of the city council meeting work session. Excuse me, Councilmember Kathy, did you say something?
I had wanted to pull something. I'm sorry. I,
Did you see the revised agenda? They have already been put under council considerations.
thank you.
Mhm. So with that, we have approved the council work session minutes from September 12th, approval of the minutes from the council meeting on September 19th, and payment vouchers. With that, we will now move to council considerations. Their first item is a service provider agreement with Carlio Engineering for Phase 1 source development and cost of the service review. And Patrick Sonderberg will be starting, and I see Jim Smith is going to start.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. I realize as Patrick was preparing for his presentation on this project tonight, that this is the first time that any of you would have been seeing Patrick. At least, for some of you in his new capacity as Water Resources Program Manager for the city. Patrick comes to us after almost 23 years, I think 23 years with Thurston County. Most recently as a supervisor for their business pollution prevention program, as well as their solid waste programs. Patrick's a lifelong learner, and he certainly has been proving that, going from dirty water to clean water. And so now he's working, he spent 23 years of his career cleaning it up, and now he's protecting it on the other side. He brings a lot of skills to our team. He rounds out our incredible skill set, most notably with his skills with managing projects and consultants. And so it was a really good fit to have him lead this effort for source development and cost of service analysis. And so I don't want to steal too much of his thunder, but we're really expecting these projects for the last couple of years. You've heard me talk about them in a number of times, bringing forward with the 2021 water system plan and the completion of our Southwest well field mitigation analysis project that was a number of years in the making. And so this is an outgrowth of that, and I'm honored to have Patrick lead that for us. And I'll turn it over to him to kind of describe where we're going next with this.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Mayor and council members, for letting me present to you today. So the project that we're proposing is a drinking water source development and cost of service review project. The recommended action is to have the council approve and authorize the mayor to sign the amendment of the service provider agreement with Carollo Engineers Incorporated for the source development and cost of service review project. I'm going to start off with a little bit of a history from the 2021 water system plan. The outline, the dark outline, is the proposed water system service area, and the city proposes to deliver water to all of the city as well as the urban growth areas. This is a map that shows where our current wells are and the wellhead protection areas. So the blue dots are our wells, and the brown and green and yellow are our wellhead protection areas. So this map shows where the water comes from in a 10-year time of travel to our wells. And so as you can see, most of our water system is drawing from the south end of the city. What we're doing right now is demonstrating growth. This is a projection that started off using from 2016 forward, because this was developed in 2017. So a few years have gone by since then. But as you can see, we're expected to double or nearly double the number of residential houses within our city in 20 years. So basically, this just demonstrates that we are going to have a lot more water connections. We're going to have a lot more people, businesses, and we need to stay out ahead of the demand and create new sources of water. This is another projection that essentially does the same thing, but looks at our average day use of water and how that's projected over time. The dark gray line is a model that demonstrates roughly what we're doing right now. So if we didn't change too much, we probably could reach, 20 years and have an adequate water supply based on a daily average. But we have times when we need a lot more water in the summertime. We use more water than we do in the winter. And so more conservative projections show that we're going to need water as soon as like 6-7 years from now. So that's how we get to this project. So what we're hoping to do is start this drinking water source development and cost of service review to stay out ahead of our 20-year plan of finding new sources of water and then getting them developed and into production before we meet the end. So this project has 3 phases. Excuse me. What we're proposing right now is just phase 1, which is to create it's the explore portion of it. And then phase 2, we would go into analyzing source options and create an implementation plan. And then finally go into implementation. So for phase 1, it's broken out into 3 tasks: the project management, the supply need and supply options, which was performed for our 2021 water systems plan. But since that started in 2017, there's been 7 years that they're going to have to reevaluate those supply options and update the projections and see where we are now. And then finally, task 3 is a cost of the service study. How much would it cost to implement the plan, get the distribution system, put in the wells? So task 1 in the project management. The objective is to set up the project objectives, scope of services, and to set a budget and a schedule for the project itself. Task 2 is to look at the supply need again, update all of the projections and where our supply options are, where can we find the water, how can it be distributed. And finally, the last task is the cost of service, where they'll go and develop the financial plan, design a rate and fee schedule, and evaluate different rate options. The total cost of this phase 1 is $245,628. It's proposed for an 8-month schedule just for this phase 1. And this has been included in the 2022-2027 water capital facilities plan, where $2.3 million has been set aside specifically for all phases of this project. And again, we recommend that the council approve and authorize the mayor to sign the amendment of the service provider agreement with Carollo Engineers for the source development and cost of service review project.
Thank you. Any questions from council? Council members, Dahl.
Thank you, Mayor. Patrick, this might not be for you since you just started, but the question is for you or Dan. Help me. I feel like I'm missing something. I feel like a while ago, some projected projects came up in part of Tumwater, like an industrial use, and questions were what was the load, what was the capacity, could Tumwater handle that, right? And there was conversations with lot or discharge, right, and permits, and it was identified that it was projected, that load. How does that link with needing water in 6 to 7 years? So I feel like I'm missing something or I'm forgetting something.
Are you talking a distinction between wastewater and drinking water, or are you just talking about the need? Can we go back to that presentation?
It was both, right? But for this
Okay.
portion, the water use.
Okay, I think the slide that Patrick had up here, I'm probably pressing buttons. Okay, can we go back to the slide that had the graph? Yeah, all right, cool. All right, this graph really kind of talks, the bulk of why we're doing what we're doing today. And the meat of this, of the source development process is that task 2, really trying to evaluate what are all the options for the city to avoid these like large jumps over here that you see, these bumps. So when we're planning, we're going through our planning process, we're actually planning for significant users to come on, some industrial user, some commercial user, some major 1 million gallon day. That's where you see these large shifts are in our water forecast. Right here. So we have one forecasted to come on around 2026, 27, and one 36, 37 timeframe. This is where we started the planning back in 2017 and 16. And as you can see from a projected a planning level, this is kind of looking at our factors, applying realistic growth factors, for the city and use factors, for the system. That's what you see is that thick gray line. The dotted line is kind of a conservative look. We say, okay, let's say, water conservation measures aren't, where we think they're going to be. Demand is greater than we thought it was going to be. So we kind of put a safety factor in there. And so that safety factor is this dotted line. And so that's really the line we want to plan to. So as Patrick noted, we'd probably be all right if we didn't do anything. Right. But the reality is we can't do nothing because we're a water system. We need to be looking far enough ahead. We need to be planning for the things that we're not seeing necessarily in front of us or might not have an application, in the door tomorrow. So we're really kind of planning for this conservative look. And as you had mentioned, Councilmember Doloff, we have a number of projects, that we've said, okay, these are some things that we could do in the future. And, one of them, a couple of these we're in the process of working towards. We have incorporated the Lathrop system into ours. Now we just need to find and reestablish that well so we can get that 40 gallons per minute that is talking about there. Actually, we could probably get more than that because that's just what that well was producing at that time.
I have one follow-up question with that.
Yes.
Will we adjust this if we identify and have more uses for reclaimed water?
The reclaimed water analysis is part of that task
Okay,
too.
perfect.
So when we're looking at the supply options and the screening of
That's
those reclaimed water conservation, we're looking at, okay, what's the next level of water conservation that we could look at? Maybe we take a more aggressive approach towards water conservation on some level. What does that look like? And that's where then we get it once we identify, the reclaimed water, new sources of new water, transitions of water, like the reclaimed water we're talking about there. Then we'll screen those, which is going to be the highest priority. Where do we invest those dollars? And that's where we get into that analyzation. So that we have some screen, we're going to apply some same criteria to all of those options that we identify under task 2.4 there. And then we'll screen those based on the same criteria. We'll theoretically come up with a matrix saying, okay, let's invest here first, here second. And we'll come up with those pieces that will actually analyze in greater detail under the next task, phase 2.
I dig it. Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. Councilmember Kathy, your hand is up. You're on mute.
Thank you. I wanted to ask, we've been using the term looking for new water sources. Where are we looking? How are we looking?
Anywhere. We're looking all across our service area. Where can we dig a new well? Where is there a vein of water? Are water rights a realistic option for us? You recall I think we completed the Southwest Wellfield Mitigation Plan, where back in the early 2000s, we identified the Southwest area of town as having productive water, but we also recognized after we did some deeper analysis that we were going to have some impacts. And we needed to then evaluate how we resolve those impacts. And really what the results of that plan was telling us was that we would have to give up more water to get new water with quotes around it, right? So we have an existing water right portfolio, and to mitigate for those impacts, we would have had to have relinquished some of those water rights to offset the impacts that new well would have produced. And it didn't make sense for us to do that. And so we continue to operate with the water right portfolio that we have today. And now we're looking at other options. There might be other areas in town where a new well would have fewer impacts on surface waters, whether it's a creek, whether it's other wells in the area. So we'd be looking at, are there other areas in town? The Northeast well field was conceptualized that would be kind of reevaluated through this project. We haven't really looked at that since 2012. Was the last time we really kind of looked at that. So that would be incorporated into this study as an option. Really kind of trying to give us a roadmap of how we develop that next source of water with a little bit better certainty than we have today.
So I'm part of the reason, excuse me, I'm asking that is because we had a lot of discussion with the Panettone warehouse and our aquifers and all of that kind of thing. And, you know, groundwater is not a forever source, and protecting it is extremely important. And I'm wondering where all of that is, and protecting, you know, drinking water and so on and so forth. Is that in this analysis somewhere, some way? Because, you know, I honestly haven't gotten over my concern about the protection of the aquifers we have. So I'm just wondering how that figures in.
Well, once we identify where a location, you know, for a viable water source would be, and we develop that water source, we would go through the processes of protecting that water source. You know, we have a program, you know, I don't know if it's formally called non-conforming use, but, you know, we do have, you know, when we expanded our well field or our wellhead protection areas based on more current technology and science modeling that we did back in 2018, we ended up creating non-conforming uses with a couple of businesses. And, you know, under the wellhead protection rules, those businesses are then required to either modify their business practices to remove that threat to the drinking water, or relocate their business. Ultimately, that's in protection of that water source. You know, so, you know, as we're identifying, you know, feasible locations, yes, protection of that water source is going to be a consideration. You know, but ultimately being able to serve to the, you know, for the residents and customers of Tumwater, that's going to be a priority, and we will protect that water source.
So with this analysis, do you still stand by and believe that we have enough water to supply our current request for 75 years?
For 75 years? We haven't looked out that far, but under that current horizon, as you've seen at that last, when we looked at that demand forecast, we're not necessarily going to reevaluate that demand forecast, because that was a fairly conservative demand forecast, and those numbers, you know, are still fairly accurate of where we believe we're going to be, particularly from a planning standpoint, and then that conservative level standpoint that we had shown in that graph. So we do expect, you know, we're still going to plan for 1 million gallon a day users coming online at some point that aren't here today, or nor do we have applications for today. But we want to plan for those so that we can get ahead of those types of developments within our community.
I hope always that our priority here is making sure that all of our residents and all of these new people who are coming and everything, that they have clean and sufficient drinking water before we're, you know, attracting large water sucking industries. I think it's really important because we don't think too much about this here, where we have a lot of rain and, you know, a lot of kind of moderate climate, but it's changing, and water is very, very, very important. So thanks, Dan. Appreciate it.
Councilmember Jefferson, I see your hand up.
Yes, Dan. So when are we going to have a detailed briefing on these findings? I think I saw something about 8 months.
Yep. Yeah. So the overall first phase of this is going to take 8 months, and that's incorporating those two tasks: one for the analysis, and then one for the cost of service evaluation as well. So we will bring those analyses back to council, either through committee or through council consideration if we have action that we're requiring, you know, that comes from that analysis. And ultimately, phase 2 will come back as well to city council for approval, because that will be that'll be the next iteration of this project that will come back with a scope and a budget that will need council approval.
Okay, thanks, Dan.
Councilmember Snyder.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, welcome, Patrick, to the staff. It's good to have you here. And Dan, I have 2 questions for you. And you kind of addressed the one issue, but I would like to explain that just a little bit more, if you would. So I know we're concerned about our water usage and we're looking down the road, and I think you mentioned 7 years plus. But when the potential Coca-Cola bottling plant comes and it's operational, if it does that accelerate the need for more water, and how are you just addressing that issue? Because it's my understanding, one more thing before you answer, please. It's my understanding that it's going to use anywhere from 500,000 to 1 million gallons of water. That's quite a bit of water.
Yes. Does it accelerate our need? If there was a 1 million gallon user to come online, as you saw from that graphic, the demand projections shows that we could actually tolerate 2 million gallon a day users coming online. Does that make me nervous in the summertime in the middle of a peak demand season? Sure. I get nervous today without those users online. Even though we have good geographic, distribution of our wells, we have some very large producing wells that should something go wrong in the middle of a peak season, I know it makes me and our operations manager fairly nervous. So we would like to build some additional redundancy so we can sleep better at night in the summertime. But, anytime, you're operating a water system and a community depends on it, it's hard to say any kind of certainties, but, like I said, this is a project to get out ahead of any types of development that's going to happen in the city. And we really want to make sure that we're building that resiliency and redundancy into our system to be able to meet the needs of our customers.
Thank you for that. And my next question, final question, is how are we offsetting water usage with conservation?
Can you repeat that? I'm not sure. I think it cut out there for a second.
My concern is how are we offsetting the water usage we have and projected future water usage with conservation and conserving and cutting back to some of the water we are using and have used more wisely instead of keep searching, use it more wisely here in our community.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's one of the things we want to look at. We know that there are always new technologies that are out there being developed, new ways to use water. There's better programs that we might be able to promote more efficient use to our customer bases, whether that's a commercial customer or a residential customer. And so we want to really kind of like revamp that conservation element of our program. Really kind of look a little bit more closely at, better landscaping practices, that might support, lower water, irrigation needs, out there. I mean, we see our water use almost triple during the summertime, and that is, predominantly due to irrigation. Right. And so what are ways that we can kind of limit, irrigative practices or make them more efficient so that way we could expand that, use that water in different ways or expand it through reclaimed water irrigation through a reclaimed water process. So we really want to look at conservation as a major focus because, it's easier to save water that you already have than to find new water to develop and construct and permit, buy water rights, all those things. And so if we can conserve and expand the uses that we have today, that would be a much more preferred approach. So conservation will rank highly on our analysis as we go through this process.
And you mentioned that we're working on a plan, or in the future we're going to be working on a plan. I mean, are we actively working on that now, or it's just a thought as we speak?
Yeah, we have a water conservation plan. We have identified goals. So every year we're tracking our progress on those goals. We're doing fairly well. Could we do better? Sure. So, really, like I told Patrick, early on, I told the consultants, let's throw the sink, all the spaghetti on the wall, see what's there, what can work for the city, what can work for our customers in this climate to conserve water that's effective, that's efficient for the city, that we can afford to do, and really kind of see where we can take that conservation program to make it work best.
Okay, thank you, Dan.
Councilmember Dolhoff had another question.
Thank you, Mayor. This conversation sparked something that I've talked to you in the past about, but in this study, is there an opportunity to look at those areas, more rural areas of Tumwater that are on well and septic, to purchasing those water rights and including that, and then getting more customers, so increasing the pie of the service, right? Because then long-term looking at converting them to our sewer. So is that part of the study of looking at current wells and buying those?
Not necessarily it's going to be part of this analysis. The challenge with like incorporating new or existing water systems is they generally have water rights that are meant to serve those systems. So the city really doesn't get a net gain in that sense. However, with efficiencies with water conservation, you could, get a little bit of efficiency on those systems. In general, the city is a preferred or primary satellite provider for those systems. We do stand, ready and willing to serve any of those systems as long as we can, either as a satellite provider or, if we have an adjacent water main, we're interested in the conversation of connecting with up those systems. We would acquire those water rights, put them on our portfolio. And again, and then those kinds of senses, if you have good operational wells in those areas, then you're actually creating some resiliency within your system because you have a disparate geographically, spatially located wells that gives you a little bit more protection in case of contamination or major earthquake or something like that.
Thank you.
Councilmember Swarthout.
Thank you, Mayor. We have the comprehensive plan. We'll be going through this in here this spring. And so I was wondering about this piece of it as far as like landscaping, because I remember when Councilmember Schneider had brought up using like turf or things that don't require water. And so, and then what, sometimes I think like with my old HOA that they have these rules in there that you have to keep a green lawn. So I'm wondering how, if that an opportunity to work with homeowners associations, or just changing our plan as far as our, what we require for landscaping, just,
I would personally love to work with HOAs that would love to refine their rules around, mandatory irrigation and finding, adequate landscaping practices that might benefit, from a visual aesthetic or, how can we help them meet their goals, and so would certainly entertain those conversations, as I know many of my staff would also entertain those conversations.
All right. Any other questions?
I'll make a motion.
All right, Councilmember Swarthout.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to make a motion that the City Council approve and authorize the mayor to sign the service private provider agreement. I can talk tonight with Carrero Engineering Inc. for phase 1 of the source development and cost service review project.
I'll second.
All right, it's been moved by Councilmember Swarthout, seconded by Councilmember Althauser. Any discussion on the motion? With that, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. The motion carries unanimous. Thank you, Dan. And thank you. Welcome to your first presentation at for City Council. Next item is the common interest and confidentiality agreement with the Port of Olympia. Jeff Myers is going to be stepping in for Karen Kirkpatrick, but we'll start out with City Administrator Lisa.
I just wanted to first mention that the Port of Olympia and the City of Tumwater have been working since 2016 on an incidental take permit from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. That is a permit that is authorized under the Federal Endangered Species Act. As a component of that project, we're required to enter into and create a habitat conservation plan. So the port and the city have been working cooperatively and collaboratively with not only U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, but the Washington State Department of Fish and Wildlife since 2016 for the past 7 years. We are in a position at this point in time, we are nearing a point in time where we need to finalize some agreements and some understandings between U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the city of Olympia, the city of Tumwater and the Port of Olympia. And so we're in a position where we are needing to meet on a regular basis with staff and with legal counsel and with both internally and externally with our partners. And so we're in a position of wanting to develop a good solid strategy for getting this finalized and across the finish line in terms of complying with the Endangered Species Act, obtaining the incidental take permit, and outlining the habitat conservation plan that is going to mitigate impacts from that incidental take permit. So with that, this document is intended to help, particularly from a legal standpoint, our attorneys to be able to communicate. And I'm going to, at this point, turn it over to Jeff Myers, who's going to explain the nature of that legal agreement.
Good evening, everyone. I'm here filling in for Karen Kirkpatrick, who had the wisdom to be on vacation. The common interest and confidentiality agreement. First of all, I'd like to commend the citizens who have brought forward their concerns about this agreement and who have raised this to take it off of the consent agenda and bring it for full discussion so that we're very clear that we are being open and transparent about our agreement to keep certain things confidential. I want to make it clear what those certain things are that are being kept confidential and why we are doing that. This particular agreement was initiated by the port's attorney. It is a fairly common type of agreement that attorneys have when they are working with other parties in a collaborative effort, whether that effort is litigation or whether it is, as in this case, proceedings before the Fish and Wildlife Service and moving towards the incidental take permit and the habitat conservation plan. The city and the port have had an interlocal agreement to jointly pursue those matters since November 2016. So this is a longstanding and very public effort to work together toward that goal. The common interest and confidentiality agreement does not create any new privileges or exemptions from public disclosure. What it does is it allows you to preserve existing legal privileges and protections so that the attorneys and staff can jointly collaborate and communicate confidentially as they develop their legal strategy and the points that they want to bring forward in support of this joint effort. This has been recognized by our Supreme Court as a valid way to proceed. In 2010, the Washington Supreme Court recognized that there is a common interest doctrine that protects joint efforts. That was done in the Sanders versus State of Washington case. And then more recently, they recognized in the Alphen versus Kittitas County case that when parties are collaborating in this kind of manner, that the common interest privilege allows them to communicate without waiving their attorney-client privileges. And in Section 6 of the agreement, I think the key paragraph in understanding what this is trying to do is to preserve existing privileges without waiving them because they are discussing privileged matters. Section 6 says, through this agreement, the parties confirm that in pursuing their common interests regarding the covered matters, they do not, by sharing protected material, intend to waive any applicable protection. So the existing attorney-client privilege, the existing work product doctrines protect the attorneys as they develop their legal strategy, as they render their legal advice. And this allows that to be shared between the port and the city as we pursue this joint effort. I wanted to let you know we received today an email from the interim executive director of the port informing his commissioners as to the consideration that the council would be undertaking. And I wanted you to understand the port's view of what this confidentiality agreement does. And Director Rudolph says, this is a routine document that is designed to extend and protect attorney-client privilege to a third party, which would be the city. In this case, extending attorney-client conversation privilege between a port staff member and attorney to other agency attorneys and staff. This document protects conversations with regard to legal matters, but in no way affects the actual documents of the HCP, all of which are public records. So our proposals that we are making to address the habitat conservation plan, to address the incidental take permit, those are all going to be public documents. And I hope that the public continues to be vigilant and active and involved in making their views known as to the wisdom and benefits of the city's proposals. But this allows the parties to cooperate in their legal strategy. And that's what the common interest and confidentiality program does. This is a very common thing. I know that the city and the city of Olympia entered into a common interest agreement last year in defending the allegations concerning the Public Disclosure Commission complaints concerning the RFA. And it's just a way that the attorneys for Olympia, the attorneys for Tumwater, and their outside counsel could all talk together and share their information and strategy. So with that, I'll answer any questions that people might have about the common interest and confidentiality.
All right, any questions?
I have a question.
Councilmember Kathy, was that your hand?
I have a question. Why is this coming up now, since we've been working on this since 2016? That's one of my questions, why all of a sudden we have a confidentiality agreement. And the other is, what exactly does incidental taking mean to in a situation like this? So those are two of my questions at the moment.
I'll address it to the extent I can, since I'm not the regular attorney. Perhaps staff will be able to answer the rest of your questions. I do know that now we are getting to a critical point in the development of the Habitat Conservation Plan and the incidental take permit. An incidental take permit is a permit that recognizes that certain protected species may be impacted and develops mitigation measures to address development actions or other actions that might have an impact on those species. And Mazama pocket gopher is certainly one of those. And it now is a critical time because the details of our proposal are being developed for presentation and consideration by the Fish and Wildlife Service.
So it's like all of a sudden we get to a critical place and we're dealing with our endangered species on this property, which is more than the gopher. And we want to be more, this isn't the right word, but we want to be more secret about it, and we don't want to let people know, or it'll be harder to get the information, or, you know, this just doesn't feel right. You know, Habitat Conservation Plan has been a really important thing, and I feel like we've tried to weave it into, you know, climate change things and so forth, and all of a sudden, you know, we're going to secret land or something, and it's concerning, and it's concerning a lot of people. So so my big question is, why are we doing it now? Why are we doing it? Why is it so important now that we're doing, you know, and we're doing take?
And I think that's because the lawyers are getting together to formulate their presentation, and it really is protecting the communications between the legal team and staff as to how to make that presentation, not the content of what is ultimately going to be presented, but sort of the development of how that is presented.
And the port is the one who put this forward and wanted this to happen now?
I think that my understanding is that they were the responsible for drafting it and suggested it.
So Councilmember Kathy, I believe Karen Kirkpatrick and Heather Burgess determined that this was an important thing to do at this point in time. I think one of the things to understand in terms of the legal components of this, and Jeff, I'm sure, is going to correct me, and I will gladly have him do that if I'm not correct on saying this. The Habitat Conservation Plan is the mitigation that's developed that allows the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to issue to us the incidental take permit, which is what we've been working on for the last several years. That is a federal law. The federal law has certain requirements and components. And similar to our issue with the wildland urban interface building code requirements, there are certain components of the federal statute that sometimes put us in a difficult position with regard to our other obligations under state law. For example, under the Growth Management Act with respect to urban growth areas, with respect to critical habitat protections and those types of things. So oftentimes, we are continuing to pursue the habitat conservation plan in a manner that balances the city of Tumwater, in particular to us, as well as the Port of Olympia as a large landowner within the community. We are balancing the needs and the differing legal requirements that we are obligated to comply with. Sometimes we can be put into a difficult position if we have a federal agency saying we need you to do X, Y, Z. The state law actually requires us to do ABC, and we're in a position of needing to figure out how we do that. So we have technical experts that help us come up. We have biologists, we have environmental engineers, we have conservationists, we have people helping us develop technical recommendations for how to preserve the species in light of growth and development that is also taking place. But we also need our legal staff to be able to help us understand if those measures are accurate, if they're legal. It might be legal under the federal law, but where does that put us in a legal position under our state statutes? So it's a very complicated endeavor. And this agreement, as I understand it, is essentially, it doesn't create any additional protections that we don't already have available to us under the Public Records Act in the state of Washington. So there are certain things, attorney-client privilege documents, that are allowed to be held from being disclosed when there is a public records request. And this is intended only to address those same allowances in a situation where we are collaborating with another agency and between and among attorneys. So it is not intended to provide any additional measures of secrecy. It is not intended to cloud or put some sort of a shroud over what it is we're trying to propose. We are doing the best we can to deal with a very complex situation, and we have to approach that from a multitude of perspectives, from a technical perspective, from a political and public engagement perspective, and from a legal perspective. And so this is just a tool that is currently necessary, according to our attorneys, for them to be able to talk and comply with the Public Records Act, and including the exemptions from disclosure that are authorized under that Public Records Act.
I understand what you're saying. I'm asking sort of why now, and what happens if people make a request for information? What about, open meetings about what's happening? What about where we are with things?
So
I'm just I just hope that everybody understands what it feels like to suddenly have a confidentiality secret thing with something that impacts such an important part of what people are interested in and feel, and this council has worked on for years. It just feels like all of a sudden, it's gotten to a point where we really can't know all of it. So this is just a big, it's a big takeaway.
So to answer your question, Councilmember Kathy, the why now is because we are getting down to we're getting to the point where the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has said you need to do, here are our expectations. We are trying to work with our technical consultants to understand how we are going to address those requirements. And we're using all of our expertise, including legal, to help us understand how to do that. Nothing changes with respect to our plan for public involvement. Nothing changes with respect to our plan and our requirements for open public meetings as they are required. Nothing about this agreement changes any of those things moving forward. This agreement is simply to help us with our one component of our faceted strategy for trying to get to the point where we even have a final habitat conservation plan that is available to go through the public process. And once we have more technical information, once we have a strategy developed, once we have more information to specifically share with the council and with the public, we will definitely do that. We're at the stage where we're trying to develop that strategy. And this is a tool that the attorneys believe they need in order to be able to collaborate and cooperate amongst themselves and with staff of both organizations.
Thank you.
Councilmember Jefferson.
Yes, understood, all that was said and in agreements. Also, in no way it affects the HCP and the open meeting. I like what you said. Can we have an item 17 that states that? In the agreement, can we package that in a way to make it, understandable that, okay, this is the intent here?
Are you talking about some additional component to the agreement itself?
Right.
I'm going
that
to let Jeff
necessary
answer that one.
to make it, clear that in no way it affects the HCP, the open meeting request that we were talking about? Is that possible? Just a couple of lines.
If you wanted to add language to the agreement and had an amendment to propose to the agreement, you could condition your approval of the agreement on that language. And then it would have to go back to the port to make sure that the port agreed with that.
Yeah. Just a thought.
But yes, that is something you could do.
Okay.
I'm going to go to Councilmember Althauser and then Councilmember Schneider.
Thank you, Mayor. Just looking at my notes. So if we receive a PRA request, there's nothing new under here. Like the response to that request today would be the same as the response to that request tomorrow if we were to pass this, correct? Like we're not changing, we're not making anything new. So really the delta between what we do or what we don't do is that without this in place, if we inadvertently share attorney-client privilege information with the port, then the veil is effectively pierced and that could become admissible in future litigation.
That is what the written confidentiality agreement is designed to prevent.
Is that
That's
it?
it.
Okay, Councilmember Schneider, and then I will go to Councilmember Agabi.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, it's good to see you, Jeff. It's been a long time. So the question I have, you mentioned that this policy will protect the legal team and staff. But you also mentioned at the same time that state law allows for this to happen. So I guess I'm kind of confused why you're coming in front of council asking us to approve it if state law does allow for that. And also, I'm really not comfortable approving something that we may not ever get the insight to and what it affects us and our community. I thought that's what we had executive meetings for. So if you kind of, just clear that up for me, because right now, I don't feel I heard enough information to justify us keeping unknown information confidential, because I'm here and we are as a council to represent our community. And you're asking us to vote for something sight unseen. And like I say, I'm not comfortable with that. So I just want your thought on what I've said.
Well, the covered matters that are defined by this are things which are identified in the course of discussions between the legal team as attorney-client privilege, work product, or other applicable privileges. Those documents may not yet be created. But as the legal teams for both parties work together they can then share their communications without fear of waiver of that privilege. That's what the agreement is really intended to do. It does give an identification of factual analysis, mental impressions, legal memoranda, draft briefs, declarations, consultant and expert correspondence with the legal team. Those are the kinds of things that this is designed to cover. And that's what is listed in paragraph 3A.
So let me ask you this. When you say client privilege information, when you say client, are you referring to as a city of Tumwater and the Port of Olympia?
The attorneys who represent those each have an attorney-client privilege with their respective clients. So when they're all working collaboratively, it allows them to recognize that that privilege is extended to the group discussions under the common interest doctrine.
So so in essence, we are the client, we being the city of Tumwater.
City of Tumwater is a client.
But yet us being council and representing the city, or at least the community, we won't have that privilege to hear that information, and we're just going to go on.
No, the council would be entitled to be briefed on any of this material by their attorneys, as you would be able to be briefed in executive session on other matters. The
Okay.
OPMA allows that.
Thank you. That clarifies it a little better. Thank you.
Councilmember Agabi.
Thank you, Mayor. So I am trying to read item number 4 and reconcile that with item number 7. And I'm not an attorney, but I'm just reading this as in plain English. Those two items are in conflict, and here is why. It says here, if a party receives a request, including a subpoena or request of public record under chapter 42.56 RCW for production of received material, received protected material. So those material that is being mentioned here, are we alluding to stuff like environmental analysis, assessment, memo, email between the attorneys? Is that what we're referring to?
What we're really referring to is the attorney's opinions and recommendations and strategies that they're developing. That's the protected material.
So this protected material in a public disclosure, those are disclosable. And yet here on item number 7, it says in an adverse position, the parties recognize that they might take positions that are inconsistent with or even adverse to each other in the covered material or other legal proceeding, in which case Tumwater can say, we would disclose it because we're a public entity, and the port will say no because they don't want to.
And then it would be up to the party that wants to prevent disclosure to take an action to enforce the confidentiality of that material. What section 7 talks about is that if we're working together and the attorney for the port makes a suggestion to propose something in one fashion and the city disagrees with that the city couldn't then take the port's recommendation and sort of use it against it somehow by disclosure of that. It would remain confidential, so that the parties can't use confidential information against each other at some point in the future.
But
that's what section 7.
The whole purpose of this agreement is for you and I to go into contractual obligation, right? Which the city of Tumwater and the port to engage in the contractual obligation as a public entity or documentation that establish their relationship are disclosable. So if they cannot do that, why do we want to have a confidential agreement? When I work for the public, I understand public disclosure. In public disclosure, you just mentioned two cases. I believe you said Supreme Court. None of those documents are in here that support this association. If you believe those documents support those cases support this association, you will have put a copy of those documents as an attachment to this so that we can see them.
Maybe it would help if I explained a little bit about the context of one of those Supreme Court decisions. There was a joint enforcement action that was being taken by Kittitas County and the Department of Ecology. And what was being asked for in the public disclosure was the emails between the attorneys for ecology and the county. Now, without a common interest agreement, an email from one agency to another agency would not be protected. And so the court recognized that they had a common interest and said that that it was best to have a written agreement, which is why the attorneys have proposed this agreement to protect their ability to have those communications to support their joint enforcement action in that case. In this case, it's not an enforcement action, it's a joint proposal to go forward with the Habitat Conservation Plan.
But during the process of discovery, wouldn't those documents be disclosed in discovery?
No, because they are attorney-client privileged.
Okay.
And that's what this is designed to safeguard and preserve.
Councilmember Althausen.
I think what really helped me understand this was that the reason why it's protected, why it needs protection is not because of a new requirement where PRA is waived under it. The reason why it needs protection is because attorney-client privilege gets waived when you share the document with a third party.
That's right.
It's not because there's something new happening with PRA. It's because that document is being shared, and once it's been shared, then it becomes admissible. That's the thrust, as I understand it.
And by sharing that with our partner, we want to preserve confidentiality, just like we would if the city was developing it with its attorneys and its own staff.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councilmember Kathy, did you have another question? Wrong button.
Joan, we lost.
Yeah, wrong button. Thank you. We're talking about all of this legal type of thing, and in plain, like Councilmember Schneider was saying, so if a citizen of Tumwater wants to make a public records request, and it's something that the attorneys have discussed, and maybe we haven't even heard about yet or something, they can't have that information. Is that correct? And then at one point you said that if we did get some information that would be discussed in an executive session. Well, once again, that's some thing that takes the people public out of it. So go ahead.
As the city council, you are the client and the attorneys can share that information with you. Under the OPMA, that's allowed to be done in executive session. Or it can be sent in writing in a privileged, confidential attorney-client memorandum. What this does is it allows that to be broadened to recognize the collaborative effort between both the port and the city. And if a citizen were to make a public records request for the attorney's memorandum, the attorney's emails to each other, if it was just a city project and the city's attorney is advising city staff, that's clearly attorney-client privileged, and the public records request would be denied because it's asking for privileged material. This recognizes that privilege also applies where you have a joint venture between the port, its legal counsel, and the staff who is working on that issue. So that the parties can freely communicate amongst themselves to develop that joint venture.
So the city of Tumwater, if we have issues as mentioned, not issues, but questions or things that we'd like to see happen in this in environmental or, as it relates to, land use or something, then it's our attorney who represents the council in that communication then back and forth.
Yes, it's the attorneys and the staff who are working on presentation and development of the habitat conservation plan to present to Fish and Wildlife.
So this goes back to then, how does the city council, who's responsible to the people who call us, catch us in the grocery store, email us, whatever, how do we answer the questions? How do we have input? How do we bring the input of the people into this? If we don't have, it just seems like we're cutting off instead of opening up.
So, Councilmember Kathy, the only thing that is the subject of this agreement are legal opinions by the lawyers and legal memorandum. So any other substantive policy or regulatory issue that is the purview of the city council to make is not included in this. So if somebody does a public records request to the city of Tumwater and they would like all documents related to the analysis of the priority recovery areas for the Olympia Pocket Gopher, they would have access to any and all of the technical data that we have produced. Under the Public Records Act, they would not have access to any attorney-client privilege communication where our attorney would be telling us, the client, legal analysis involved in certain in that information. So it's only the legal analysis of situations that is protected currently, whether it's somebody doing a public records request strictly to the city of Tumwater, and this agreement extends that protection then to communications between and among the both lawyers and both sets of staff, as if it is, because we have this common goal we're trying to achieve. So again, none of the technical data, none of the technical analysis, none of the proposed conservation measures, none of the proposed cost estimates, none of the requirements of the Fish and Wildlife Service, nothing that ultimately ends up being in the actual documents that have the substance that are implemented are protected or hidden by any stretch under this agreement. All of those come to the city council ultimately for review, and in essence, the authority for approving the incidental take permit that then triggers the Habitat Conservation Plan rests solely with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And so our job, we are an applicant to the federal U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for an incidental take permit. And as a component of that application, we're trying to develop this habitat mitigation plan that's going to identify, as part of this application, what we're going to do to ensure preservation and conservation of the species of concern, and there are 4 of them. None of that data, none of that information is protected under this this particular agreement. There aren't any secret strategies. There aren't any secret agreements for, degrading habitat in one area in exchange for protecting it in another. None of that is that. There's nothing secret about that. This is a public process. Absolutely, fundamentally, as soon as we get to a draft habitat conservation plan, it's required to go through the National Environmental Policy Act review. After that, we have to do a SEPA, State Environmental Policy Act review, for anything that we have to do in terms of actions we might have to take to amend our critical areas ordinance or to implement regulatory requirements in our development review process. All of those things go through the typical public review process. All of those things are discoverable under the Public Records Act. Nothing in this agreement changes anything about what we are legally obligated to share, nor those things that are legally allowed to be protected, which are things that are evaluated and discussed between the legal advisor and the legal attorney for the client, which in this case is the city of Tumwater. And in the case of the joint venture, then if I, for example, was asking Karen and Heather Burgess for a legal analysis of a specific situation, that communication between them and I, whether it was just me and Karen, would be protected because it's legal attorney-client privileged. And this agreement simply says that then if Heather's involved in that conversation, that same information is protected amongst us, the three of us, in the same manner. And it's a tool that allows for what is already allowed by state law to be protected, which is just that legal attorney-client privilege. It allows that to be extended from the city and our relationship with Karen, and it extends it to our relationship in working on the same legal matters with the port and their attorney.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And I just think it'll behoove us to keep informed, have maybe more opportunities for council to keep up on the process. I don't know, just looking at it, it was not something that looked good and something that I thought would benefit the process. Because this is my first glance at it, and I wish we'd had chance to have this conversation in a work session or something. But
yeah.
Thank you for everyone for the information and the explanations. Much appreciated.
Councilmember Doha.
Thank you, Mayor. One of the things that I appreciate all that clarification. That's why I asked for it to be pulled, right? Because it's the first time we saw it. What I'm challenged with is that what you were saying, I'm not connecting with this agreement. So with the time bound, I don't know the urgency of this, and we don't have Karen, though Jeff, I really dig working with you on TCOM 911. Is there an opportunity to have some edits from the city of Tumwater to go back? So I'm wondering where the timeline is, and that I agree with what is all had said, but it doesn't match what I'm reading. And so that's where I feel like I still have a disconnect. And is there an opportunity for edits?
There's always an opportunity for edits.
And in the drafting of this agreement, it certainly went to Karen for her review on behalf of the city.
Right.
Before it was finalized and agreed to by the port.
I acknowledge that we have an attorney on council, Michael. My background is chemistry. I don't feel comfortable voting yes on this as it's presented, but I support the concept and the idea. I'm just not in support tonight of what's presented right now.
All right. Any further discussion? Councilmember Schneider.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm really confused about this because you mentioned state law and you're allowed to do this and you're allowed to do that. But yet you're coming forth and asking us to approve this amendment. So I'm with Councilmember Dahlhoff. At this point, if we would have to vote on it, I would have to say no, because I'm probably just as confused as I was before we started this discussion. So if you want a yes vote from me, possibly, it has to be moved to a work session where we can do more detail about this and have more time to think about it and go over it and stuff like that. And so I just wanted to share my opinion, and I'll shut up right now.
Councilmember Jefferson.
Yes, I am comfortable approving it after we add the additional language to clarify that the agreement does not affect the HCP like we had discussed. I have no problem with, authorizing and moving to for the mayor to sign it. as long as we add that language. Because I understand the intent of what it's for.
Councilmember Kathy?
I'm not comfortable voting for it, and I understand what Council Member Jefferson is saying, but I might be too after we see what's added to it, but that's not added tonight, and we haven't talked about it. So without further discussion, yeah, I would be voting against it tonight.
Councilmember Althauser?
I think, you know, Councilmember Jefferson, you make a really good point. It would be possible to have a motion to make a contingent upon agreement from the port that says that no documents that are disclosable under I don't know the RCW, but whatever the PRA is, that the PRA and the OPMA, that this agreement does not affect any documents disclosable under the PRA or the OPMA. You could make that contingent upon the port agreeing to those changes. So if that was an option, that's something I would be comfortable with.
I would vote yes.
So Councilmember Althauser, would you like to make a motion?
Sort of feel like I should probably write it down so I say all the words correctly.
Council, yeah.
If I heard you correctly, you were proposing a contingency that language be added to the agreement that says that no documents disclosable under the PRA or OPMA, including the Habitat Conservation Plan and incidental take permit applications submitted to Fish and Wildlife, would be exempt from disclosure.
Yes. I would move to approve and authorize the mayor to sign the common interest and confidentiality agreement with the Port of Olympia contingent upon the language as previously stated.
And I second.
Okay, it's been moved in second. Any additional discussion on this motion? So with that, I'm going to call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, nay.
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 So correct me if I'm wrong. I have 2 nays and 5.
I'm kind of confused what we're doing. Are we?
We're making a change to that to be
Are we waiting
amended.
for the change to be made before we vote, or are we voting
Voting
before the
based on the
change?
contingency of that being added.
See, I am not into any contingency. I want to see the change and then we vote. As a parent, show me and then we'll go.
So your vote is no on that.
I don't know if I'm voting no. I just not.
So you sustain? Okay. So we have 4 for, 2 against, 1 abstain. So with that, it passes, and we will again see the language, and when Karen comes, we will be able to go ahead. Yeah.
And the language that I have says that no documents disclosable under the PRA or OPMA, including the Habitat Conservation Plan and incidental take permit application, would be considered exempt under this agreement.
Perfect. And then this will go back to the port, and then we'll see what action they take. It may end up coming back to us.
Right.
It may, if it's possible, it could come back. So,
So it's not dependent on the port accepting it? It's just goes back.
The
Okay.
port would have to agree.
a port has to agree to this, or we start over.
Right. The motion was that the agreement is approved subject to inclusion of that language. If the port doesn't agree to that language, we don't have an agreement.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, one more item. We now have the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee 2024 funding recommendations. Troy is not here.
Can I speak to it?
Administrator Parks, do you want to start?
No, I think that Councilmember Swarthout was wanting to address this issue and provide some context for the recommendation and asked that this be pulled so she could do that.
All right, go ahead, Council Members Swarthout.
Thank you, everyone. I hope this is a softball one, so it's not a difficult. So we held our LTAC committee met on September 18th, 2023, and we had 15 applicants this year. And part of the application process for the City of Tumwater LTAC, the members are required of the requesting group are required to make a short presentation to the lodging tax committee members in order to receive funds. And so it's kind of actually a fun day because you get a recap of how the money's been spent, and then we have some new requests sometimes. And so this year we had one of our returning groups, and then one of the new groups failed to make the presentation. And according to one of our longest serving board members, he said this had never happened before. So unfortunately, based on our application process, those two groups did not get funded this year. And so I just wanted to have this poll just in case you had any questions before we take action and approve the LTAC recommendations. So,
Councilmember Althauser.
Thanks. So just to be clear, the requirement that you have to be in attendance is an LTAC requirement, not a City of Tumwater requirement.
actually, it's part of our application process. So we've been having a conversation about gathering the committee again as we get closer to the next year and just review this, because it was just one of these situations that it caught us by surprise as well. And that's our intention, is not to not hand out money. We want to be able to be of service to our community. So we will be addressing the application again and just hopefully revise it and just make it more friendly and just, yeah. So that's our plan for this fall.
So to address it in the future, it's an action that LTAC will need to take, and then we'll continue to abide by the recommendations that they make.
Correct.
Councilmember Dalhoff.
Thank you, Mayor. Eileen, Councilmember Swarthout, I appreciate you bringing this up. And then I think this is a great example of when we find things that need to be updated, that we can take them and update them and continue to move forward. So thank you for that. And can you remind me, so what's the next steps for those two entities?
Let's see. That's a good question. We are looking at one of the groups in particular, being able to assist them with their event. And the other one, we haven't talked with them yet. They have done this in the past, but we'll do the funding, and sometimes they haven't had an opportunity to use it. So we'll still be in check back with them. But the new event, we are looking at being able to, because we're already at this event, and so we're looking at expanding the City of Tumwater's presence at this event as well. So hope that answers your
So
question.
it looks favorably that we will find money to
Oh, yeah.
support an event that we are a part of, that the mayor attends.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
And we already have money for that. This
Yeah.
was additional.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yes, this was additional funds to that.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yes, it doesn't stop them from doing it. All right.
So I didn't know if anyone had any other questions. You would
Any
like
other
me to make a motion?
questions? All right, with that, it doesn't, do you want to go ahead and make the motion? Someone want to make a motion?
Yeah, I would like to make the motion to approve the Lodging Tax Committee's 2024 funding recommendations into the city's budget.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Swarthout, seconded by Councilmember Althauser. Any discussion on the motion? With that, I will call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Thank you. Motion carries unanimous. Okay, now we're to committee reports. So the first committee report is Public Health and Safety, Councilmember Dalhoff.
Thank you, Mayor. Public Health and Safety Committee meeting will be meeting October 10 at 8 a.m. The agenda items include Pierce College affiliation agreement and Thurston County Public Defense update.
Great. Next is General Government Committee, Councilmember Althauser.
Thank you, Mayor. We will be meeting on October 11th at 8 a.m. We continue our journey through the 2025 comp plan update. We will also be discussing letter of commitment regarding a climate grant application that we made as a city. And also going over Amendment 3 for the Bush Prairie Habitat Conservation Plan and discussing our parks ordinances updates. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Swarthout, Public Works Committee.
Public Works next meeting will be on October 19th at 8 a.m. and there are 5 items on our agenda currently. It will take me a long time to read them all, so I advise that the information is available on our website for the agenda. So again, we'll be meeting on October 19th at 8 a.m. on Zoom.
Great. And Budget and Finance Committee, today we finally scheduled the appointments, the meetings. First meeting will be Monday, October 23rd. And this will be just to discuss the Community and Human Resources Program funding and review the budget amendments number 1. The second meeting will be held on Wednesday, November 15th, and that will be discussing amendment, an additional budget amendment. So
We did just have to change that budget and finance, the second one. It's going to be on the 7th and I'll confirm a time. later.
okay, so we've already had a schedule change. Thank you. This is how it's very hard working with everybody's calendars to try to do this one. So they will be posted. So with that, we will go to Mayor's City Administrator report, and I will start out with City Administrator Parks.
Really short this evening. I just wanted to share with you, we've got notification today from the Washington State Department of Ecology Model Toxics Control Program. The city of Tumwater was successful in applying for a $200,000 integrated planning grant that will allow us to do due diligence in terms of environmental characterization of potential contamination on the Washington State DOT property on Capitol Boulevard. And so we're very grateful to Department of Ecology for that opportunity. The nice thing is it's $200,000. There's no match required. So we're really pleased with that. And again, kudos to Austin Ramirez. He's batting 1,000 at this point with his grant applications for environmental remediation projects.
Great, thank you. So for my report, I have attended a couple of nice city events since our last council meeting. Kindred Park opening, and Councilmember Schneider was also in attendance. And I want to make one suggestion, is that we don't do such tough ribbon with those big, huge scissors. That was definitely entertaining struggle, and doing that in front of a large crowd. So, and with that, I also attended the Fall Fest this last Saturday. What a great event that is. We definitely had a whole lot of people there, great amount of participants and people coming to that. I am scheduled to attend the Intercity Transit Authority meeting tomorrow night. I also want to make let everyone out there know that the Intercity Transit has a community advisory committee, and the deadline for making application to serve on that committee is October 6th. So that deadline is coming up really quickly. So go to Intercity Transit if this is a type of service you would like to do. And then also a reminder that we have the cleanup drop-off this Saturday from I think 9 to noon, 9 to 1, somewhere in that time frame. We have it on our website. I didn't write down the time, just the date. And also another item that I think I'm really excited about is the market building at the Brew District is opening, they're already open, but they're having their official opening on October 14th. And if anyone has a chance to go there, it is beautiful on the inside of that. They have such amazing shops in there, and it's just going to be, I think, a really nice community gathering place for the city of Tumwater. So with that, I will move to council member reports, and I guess I will start in chamber, and I will start with Councilmember Agabi. Sorry, I caught you off guard.
Very short, very short. So on Tuesday, JASCOM meeting was canceled due to lack of quorum. And on Wednesday, I wasn't able to go to YAM for TRPC meeting at noon. So that's my report.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Dalha.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll keep it short as well. I had Thurston County Opioid Response Task Force meeting. I think will be shorter than the title of that group. So more to come regarding settlement funds coming in and what that group holistically is planning to do. And then I had TCOM 911, a joint meeting with the administration board, which I serve on, an operations board with our Chief Hurley and Chief Wicks. So it is always a pleasure to be in a meeting with Chief Wicks and crack jokes with him. So that's my update.
Thank you. Councilmember Althauser.
Thank you, Mayor. I would just second the kudos to Austin. I hadn't heard about that grant, but that's fantastic news for our long-term strategic vision. That's wonderful. Last week I attended the exit audit, the audit exit, not really sure which order that is, but it's the last meeting you have when you do a really good job on an audit. And I'm pleased to say that that meeting lasted all of 15 or 20 minutes. And that there were no concerns to report, and that our finance team is doing a tremendous job in dotting the I's and crossing the T's, except with numbers. Last week, I also attended the Regional Housing Council along with Councilmember Kathy. One program I want to highlight that we discussed was one that the City of Olympia is actually applying for. It's called the Pathway to Ownership program. It's a grant program that is funded by the Department of Housing and Urban Development with federal dollars to essentially work with local nonprofits to provide a pathway to ownership for low-income families that otherwise would not feasibly be able to access home ownership. And as we know, with home ownership comes development of assets, intergenerational wealth, all sorts of really important characteristics that help disrupt intergenerational poverty. They're seeking, the awards are between $1 and $10 million. So they hope to get somewhere in the middle of that range, and they'll be applying at the end of the month. You can use those funds for things like down payments or for other sort of similar entry fees into home ownership. And that program, if successful, would be administered by our friends at Habitat, who are also active in our community. We also discussed our communications plan for the Regional Housing Council. That's a really important measure so that as we do make progress on these really important regional housing priorities, that we are clear and transparent with the public about what we're doing. And one other important piece of action we also took at that meeting, the legislature last year passed increases to take into account inflation for contracts for homeless service provision in reflection of the increased cost of living and also the relatively low wages that our homeless service providers make compared to other professions. And so with that, those funds, which is about $750K, we were able to provide an inflationary increase in those contracts so that most of those service providers are making a minimum of $28 an hour, which is strategically just a really important commitment to make because it is so hard to hire people to do work that is that heavy and that intense. They're having a really difficult job finding staff. I think that's my report from RHC. Our next meeting is at the end of the month.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Swarthout.
Thank you, Mayor. So in addition to the LTAC meeting, I too attended the exit meeting, and I too echo the kudos to our financial staff. So it was a very good outcome, and it was very short and sweet. And then I too attended the Fall Festival. I think I'd like to request next time I was standing next to the recycling because we were trying to, we're showing that we are going to start recycling at events and also composting. And so, so I was standing next to those containers, and I don't know if I was creeping people out, but I would like to have a sign that says, I'm the recycling guy. Just having somebody stand next to the garbage. Yeah. And I want to count because Councilmember Schneider had a event staff vest. So I want something cool too. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Jefferson.
Yes, on 20 September, I attended the T-Hope's transition meeting with Department of Health and ESD 113, our new contract holder. And we discussed wanting a smooth transition. And the job for the T-Hope's manager is open, and one should be selected and on board by the end of November. On the 21st of September, I attended the Law and Justice Committee meeting. We discussed the reported crime update. And we are seeing a 22% increase in the county, the highest increase since 2018. Lacey saw an increase of 12% since 2017. Olympia at 7%, the highest since 2016. Tumwater saw an 18% increase since 2018. And Yelm is at 47% since 2022. City crime trends. So violent crime is increasing, as well as property crime and sex crimes. They are back to pre-pandemic levels. We discussed the cause of the increase. Was it due to COVID? Was it due to the Blake decision? There were 12 months of no jury trials and 18 months of reduced jury trials due to social distancing rules. So the amount of people appearing in court was reduced. They're now catching up, and that was the cause of the increase. We received a briefing on restorative justice given by the Dispute Resolution Center. And restorative justice is a philosophy program mindset that focuses on harm done. It addresses needs and impacts of crime. Punishment is also a piece of restorative justice. Now, it reduces recidivism, and it's evidence-based. You may have probably seen TV shows where victims and victimizers meet and they have powerful dialogue. So it gives victims a chance to heal and be heard. So face-to-face dialogues are occurring in Thurston County, but it's being done via Zoom. Both parties must agree to meet. We currently have a pilot program started in 2021, 5 cases so far. It's going well, and this is only for drug court participants. They're involved in the program, and these are people who want to be involved with the program. So overall, that's my report. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Kathy.
Thank you. As Councilmember Althauser said, I was part of the Regional Housing Council, and the program he mentioned is one of those hopeful programs for people to have an opportunity at home ownership. Tomorrow starts my month's schedules of meetings. Tomorrow is the Solid Waste Advisory Council. And somebody asked me exactly since the last time I mentioned it, what that stands for. It stands for the Solid Waste Advisory Council, and it is a county council. And we advise and make recommendations and so forth to the county commissioners regarding your garbage and your pickup and your all of that, and all of the things that have to do with in the cities in the whole county about recycling and composting and facilities like the WARC and so on. So that's what that committee is. And tomorrow morning is that meeting, and starts my month of, I won't mention the other meetings. What I did want to mention is that when I asked and said I wanted to take something off the agenda, wasn't what was already taken off of the agenda. And I just want to say that for my constituents who asked me about this, it was in regard to the to the September 19th minutes from the council meeting. And on pages 8 and 9, there are some questions about the fact that the city at this point does not have anything in our codes or our land use or anything about food pantries or distribution or handing out of fresh foods and so forth. So anyway, some people read that, asked me some questions about it, and I was going to pull that and bring that up. So I want to say that because I promised to do it, and I will do it some other way or some other time. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Schneider.
Mayor, I have no report tonight.
Oh, thank you. All right. So with no other business, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
I apologize for my delay.